Welcome back to another episode of Smart Money Moves Fresh Minds. I'm Wesley. We don't have Joe today, but I have a special guest, Derrick, with us today.
Going into the next step is actually presenting the financial recommendations. And what we look at there is the trade-offs and the alternatives, what we're recommending, because we're not just going to tell you, go do this, go do that. It's more of, this is what we're seeing. This is what we could do, but we could also do this. This is the trade-offs for doing it this way, but then there's trade-offs for doing it that way. And we kind of come to that decision together. We may have an idea of the recommendation that we think is the best for the client, but we really want the client to understand that themselves and really come to that understanding like, hey, I'm doing this because it makes sense for me and my financial advisor advised me to do it. I'm doing something not just because my financial advisor is advising me to do it, because I fully understand why I'm doing it and the outcomes that are going to come after that.
Yeah, that why behind our recommendations is so important, because we don't sit in front of our client in a client meeting and say, we're smart, we know what we're talking about. We do, but that's not the reason for implementing our recommendations. We want the client to understand the underlying mechanics, to not knowing every single thing because they don't need to. And then if they did, they wouldn't need us, but to shed light on the why behind it, so they know why we're doing it. I think that that's really important and part of our process to be transparent with clients so everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And I think it all ties back to, how does this recommendation help me achieve my goals?
I think one way to put it is, that we use a top-down approach to start with the client's goals and objectives, and then look at their plan and then figure out how we're going to make their goals and objectives come to life if they're not already met. So, if they want to retire in, let's say, 10 years and, be able to sleep at night and have clarity into their plan, let's explore strategies on how to meet their goals and objectives instead of we don't start with strategies. We start with the end in mind and then work from there and top down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. When we are presenting our financial plans, we definitely like to emphasize that this is just the first iteration of this financial plan. What we give you is a living, breathing document that gets updated as things change in your life, because as we know, life happens. Things unexpectedly pop up all the time. That HVAC just went out at the most inopportune time in the middle of winter. Stuff like that. So as we say this, we understand that goals can change over time as well. Through the monitoring process, we are always looking to update those goals as life happens and things unfold. When we talk about implementing the financial planning recommendations, we're not just going to give you a to-do list and say, go figure it out. We are there to let you know who is responsible for these goals. It may be things that we need to do. It may be things that you need to do on your own, but we're always going to be there to walk you through those steps. I oftentimes am on the phone with these other companies that they've worked with before, just asking the right questions with them on the phone. Calling Social Security is definitely one of the things that I experience a lot with my widows, where it's just a daunting task. They don't know what to ask. They don't know who to ask it for. If there is an issue, they don't know how to escalate it. And that's where I can come in and really hold that client's hand and walk them through that whole process. And it's not just you get a to-do list at the end of this. We are going to help you implement these recommendations. And through the monitoring process, we're going to walk with you through this financial life of yours.
Yeah, I think that's great to articulate. Do you have anything else to add, Derrick, on our process in general?
No, I just think it's a proven process that really starts with understanding the client. That initial conversation is crucial to this whole financial planning process, because we're really taking the time to know the client's ins and outs, what makes them tick, what their concerns are, what keeps them up at night. And we organize it in a way where that toolbox is clean. You know where to go to find the right tool for the project at hand. And if you don't, you have a handyman that you can call and they can walk you through all those steps.
And we're not just talking about, investment planning and asset allocation here. This process, Black Diamond process, encompasses estate, tax, insurance, and investment planning. And these all work together and they're all intertwined. But Derrick, could you provide us an example of why ignoring one of these areas could create a big problem either today or down the line for someone?
Yeah, so if we're just looking at one piece of the puzzle, one tool in the toolbox, it's not going to make sense unless you look at the whole picture, the whole problem, the whole project at hand. If we make a recommendation, going back to our early recommendation, put these international securities in your brokerage account because that's what you had before, that's what you want. It makes sense to you. You can recognize the names. But through our conversations, we realize, hey, you're going to get a tax bill here at the end of the year that you may or may not be aware of. But through our conversations, we understand all of their assets. So if they have a retirement account as well as a brokerage account and you are attached to those securities, let's just move them into a different account where you have a tax advantage or a tax advantage account where you're not going to get these ordinary dividends that are going to give you a tax bill.
Yeah, I like that. I just thought of an example. So I'm going to relate retirement planning, tax planning, and estate planning together. So let's look at different account types. So if someone is really overfunded in their traditional IRA, let's just say it's a rollover, and let's say someone has $2 million in there. Now we have to start to look at, all right, they're going to have to take RMDs on this money. When they reach RMD age, we're going to be forced to take distributions out of those accounts, taxed at ordinary income rates. And we have to look at, their tax return and see what other income they're going to have. How is this going to affect, IRMA? How is this going to affect, the tax on Social Security? And to relate estate planning to that is if there's still going to be money in that rollover IRA, how are their kids going to get that money? They're going to have to deplete the account right now within 10 years. And if their parents are taking RMDs, it could be even sooner. What tax bracket are their kids in? To really know, like you use the education example if they have younger kids, but we're talking about older kids, are they in the 37% tax bracket or, say in the 24 and this is going to bump them up even more? Are they starting a business? What does their life look like? And how can we model, passing down for them inheriting the IRA? How is that going to look for them? These are questions that we need to ask and get more information. But I think that's another plus and another example of how all the areas of planning, they can work together. Just one example that we see often. So, Derrick, I just want to keep going here. When a client comes to Black Diamond, and kind of going through this process, let's talk about the why behind the process. What's the first step for someone to get clarity in their finances, or what's something that we see commonly in the process that people benefit from?
I think the biggest thing that we can really help with is organizing someone's life. Mm-hmm. I had a client come in earlier this week with the banker's box of financial documents. She knew everything was in there that's needed, but it was one of those things that she gets something in the mail, it goes in the box. And she knows it's something that she wants to do and wants to work with, but it's just so overwhelming and that box gets bigger by the day. Through that process, through that conversation, we were able to identify the key components to her life and what she's really looking for, not only for her, but for her kids. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have that conversation with her and I just looked at the box. I can look at the box, I can organize it, I can get you what you need in a one-page document that this is what you have, this is what you need to do. But that's not going to solve her specific goals. And that's where, when we have that initial conversation and really get to understand that person, we can kind of draw that out of them. And in that initial conversation, if I'm the one talking the most, I'm not doing my job. I really need to listen there and ask the right questions to spark a conversation and really get to know somebody at a deeper level.
I like that. Derrick, how do you help your clients prioritize what matters most?
I think when we talk about trying to figure out what matters most, it comes back to that initial conversation again and reminding folks of what they said in that conversation and what goals they identified. Because going back to our developing planning recommendations, we tie everything back to the client's goals. Sometimes those goals are stated blatantly. I want to retire at 65. Something very concrete, but sometimes they're a little bit more broad, like going back to the education example. I don't know what my kid's going to want to do in 18 years, if they're going to want to go to college, trade school, or right into the workforce type of deal. Mm-hmm. But what we can do is plan for that and contingencies. If you save all this money and that kid decides to go directly into the workforce and you have this chunk of change, what are you going to use it for? There are options of what you can use it depending on what vehicle it is in to help that person out.
I like that, adding contingencies to the plan. So if X doesn't happen, then we'll do Y.
Exactly.
Breaking it down into possible outcomes for people and then weighing the trade-offs of decisions. Derrick, let's give the listeners one takeaway here. What's one thing that our listeners can do today or in the near future to get their financial life organized?
I think one of the big things that I see a lot with our clients is they don't know where to save. They have additional funds coming in. They know to save into their 401k. Maybe they don't know what percentage is the best percentage to do that. Or do they have other options to save into, like an IRA, a Roth IRA, brokerage account? So I think the biggest thing that we help our clients with is give them a game plan of where to put those extra funds and in kind of like a hierarchy of where to put your savings. I think a lot of folks get confused about emergency funds, 401ks, HSAs, IRA, brokerage, 529s. Where do I put my savings? And we can really help them identify the best spot based on their situation and their goals of where to put those funds and in what order to put those funds.
Yeah. And I think one thing that people can do today is contribute enough to their 401k, regardless, just to get the match, because that's free money, and, figure out a way to do that. Our emergency funds are important, but 9 times out of 10, it's better to just contribute up to the match. There's some circumstances where you may need that liquidity, but I would say in general, getting a free money is really the best option. All right, Derrick, thanks for joining me today. Next week, guys, we're going to dive into the human side and how planning isn't just about numbers. Most people think about advisors, it's just stocks, bonds, mutual funds, but we're going to talk about how planning encompasses the human side. Planning, it's about your life, your goals, and your relationships at the end of the day, not just about numbers. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you next time on Smart Money News Fresh Minds. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.